Okay, we are now going to talk about the Roman Empire. Get ready. There's a lot of things. Okay, so this is just going to kind of be a basic intro to the Roman Empire and its history, and then we'll go into the art in more detail. Couple of things. What do you know about Rome? Rome is one of the areas that we cover in this class that people come in with a fair amount of knowledge related to Rome usually. So you can kind of think about it, you're like, maybe you know Julius Caesar was a guy, okay? Maybe you know some other things about Rome, gladiators, that kind of thing. So just kind of think about it a little bit. At its greatest extent, this is what the Roman Empire looked like. So it's big, right? There's a lot of ground that's covered by the Roman Empire, quite literally. So it's not just Italy. We know that in contemporary society, Rome is a city in Italy, and we know that. But when we're talking about Rome in the ancient world, it was a very different kind of thing. It was a huge empire that took over most of Europe and a chunk of northern Africa and a chunk of the Middle East. So let's get into just a little bit about the history of Rome. And again, this is kind of a crash course, okay? So basically, here are just some little Roman factoids, and then I'll get into the history. Most of the major roads in Europe today are still following Roman roads that were established during the Roman Empire. So it has lasting effects, including things like infrastructure, which isn't something that you necessarily think of. The Romans invented concrete. We're going to talk about that a lot because it's very significant in terms of architectural history. It creates a whole architectural revolution. The modern calendar is developed by the Romans. A lot of the aspects of modern government are developed by the Romans. Rome is founded by the brothers Romulus and Remus in 753. And so they have their own kind of mythology around them. They were supposedly raised by a she-wolf, raised by a wolf, and then they come to this place with 7 hills, and it becomes Rome. Later, it becomes Caput Mundi, which means the head of the world. Okay, and again, this is the Western world, right? It's not the whole world. Palatine Hill is sort of Rome is the city of the 7 hills. Palatine Hill is where we have the kind of first capital of Rome. Okay, so we have a lot of history to go through. We'll just start kind of at the beginning, okay? So there's the rule of the Latin and Etruscan kings. We have the lectures on the Etruscans that you've already watched, hopefully. So that's the kind of pre-Roman monarchy, which is from 753 to 509 BC. And the first king is the Etruscan king Tarquinius Superbus, which my brain always wants to read as Superbus, not his name. Okay, so we'll just go through this kind of quickly. Then Rome becomes a republic. Okay, so not a monarchy anymore. Instead of being ruled by one guy who's the king, like here, we have a senate. Okay, and the senate is a council of elders. So senate and senior have the same root word. So it's literally a kind of council or panel of old men, particularly patricians. So in Roman society, we have patricians and we have plebeians. Patricians are wealthy landowners, and plebeians are farmers, merchants, freed slaves, that kind of thing. So to be on the Senate, you have to be male, and you have to be a patrician. Okay, so you have to be wealthy and older. Okay. In addition to the Senate, you also have a consul, sometimes 2 consuls, sort of like we have in America a president, but a little, not quite as powerful, basically, kind of at the whim of the Senate, essentially. Okay, so we have our Senate and we have our 2 elected consuls. In times of crisis, like war, the Senate can give the one or the other of the consuls, they can turn them into a dictator temporarily so that they can make quick military decisions and things like that in terms of crisis. So you can see on this list during the Republic we have Sulla. Sulla is a consul. He is then given dictator powers. He then gives them back and becomes the consul again. Julius Caesar, probably a familiar name. He's a pretty famous dude. Here he is. So Julius Caesar is the consul. He becomes a dictator, okay, and then he doesn't want to give his dictator powers back, and so that's a problem for a lot of people, and he ends up getting assassinated, okay, and the guy who takes over after him is depicted here. This is Mark Antony. Mark Antony believed that the Senate consul construct made sense and that that's how it should be. Okay, now we get into the early empire. So this begins with Augustus. So Augustus, Octavian Augustus, is Julius Caesar's heir. He was actually his nephew, but he was adopted by Julius Caesar as an adult so that he could become his heir. This is the thing that we'll see happens with some frequency in the Roman Empire. And so he thinks that it is incorrect that his dad, his adoptive father and uncle, Julius Caesar, was assassinated. He thinks that he was a very good dictator, and he decides that he is going to become an emperor and he is going to take back these dictator powers. And he does. So then, instead of being a republic, we're an empire. And here we have a list of the Julio-Claudian line. So it's like the Egyptians, it's like a dynasty that's inherited, okay? And the one that begins with Augustus, but really Julius Caesar, is the Julian-Claudian line, and it runs up until the Flavian dynasty takes over. We go into the High Empire. We have Nerva and the Spanish emperors, Trajan and Hadrian, and then we end with the emperors of the Antonine dynasty. Okay, one of the famous people there is Marcus Aurelius. You may have heard of him. And then we have the late empire, and that begins with the Severan dynasty and includes the soldier emperors of the 3rd century. And then we have the tetrarchs, which is where the Roman Empire gets divided into 4. That's what tetra means. And so there's 4 emperors who divide it up. And then it's reunited under Constantine, who is the first Christian emperor, and then he moves the capital of Rome to Constantinople, which he names after himself. We'll talk about him later. Okay, and then it's divided into the Eastern Roman Empire, which becomes Byzantium, and the Western Roman Empire. Okay, whoa, let's back up. So that was a intro to kind of the whole history of Rome. It was very quick. It didn't have all the things in there. During all this, the Romans conquer the Etruscans, the Gauls, who were to the north, the Samites, and the Greek colonists to the south. They conquer the Carthaginians in North Africa, who are led by Hannibal. They conquer lots. There's lots and lots of conquering that happens, okay, to create this vast empire, and lots of political happenings that shape all of this. Okay, so that was a lot of information really quickly. That's your intro to Rome, and when you come back, we're going to talk about art and architecture and see what happens. Okay.